Hi, everyone. Welcome. This is Deana Janceski. We'll be getting started here in a few minutes. Thank you for participating. All right, let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to our Australian attendees and to our viewers out on Facebook. My name is Deana Janceski, and I am UMD's Michigan Chair and UMD's Event Committee Chair. Today, I have the pleasure to be the moderator on our first episode of Muabet to Meto. So what is Muabet? Muabet means conversation. And with that said, we have a great conversation coming up with Meto. I want to start off by showing some gratitude and appreciation to all of our members and longtime supporters. Without you, UMD would not be what it is today. So, some housekeeping items to get started with. All lines are on a listen-only mode, and if you have a question you would like to submit, please submit that through the chat or through the comments for those attending through Facebook. We will be working on answering as many questions as we can, and for those that we cannot address, we will circle back with you or discuss it on future episodes. All right, Meto, bravo, dobro jutro from Michigan. I want to recognize the amazing and critical work UMD has done over the past 16 years, especially in the last year.
Dobro jutro, Deana, and dobro jutro from Washington, D.C.
Awesome. So, Meto, let's get right into it. So I'm curious, how did COVID-19 impact UMD's work?
Thank you, Deana, for asking this an important question. I think COVID hit every nonprofit pretty hard because we've had to actually change the very way we work, right? A lot of our events were physical events. We had our masquerades, our gala balls, our roundtable discussions, meetings in Congress, and whatnot. And virtually since March 12th of 2020, we've had to stop all of that. And, we had to really refocus the way we work at UMD, and everything became virtual. I don't know how many countless sessions of Zoom we've had, and I think this is our 70th perhaps Zoom session publicly. And over the course of the last year, we've garnered probably about 410,000 views, which is remarkable. I mean, something that we wouldn't have had in terms of physical events. There's I don't know how many events we would have to hold to have 410,000 participants. So I'm glad that to a certain extent, definitely COVID has helped improve and probably even helped get our message across the world a lot more than we would have beforehand. However, I really want to state here that all of us have been affected. We lost numerous members of the Macedonian community worldwide due to COVID. Just most recently, the other day, I heard of a friend's passing. And so, it's unfortunate that we can't attend these funerals and pay respect for people to people, but they're in our memories, and we will continue preserving their memory in our communities throughout the world. So.
Yeah. It's been a hard year, definitely, to say the least. When it comes to the pandemic, how does that what was the effect on the UMD programs? Like specifically like the scholarship program, or obviously the events you mentioned, or advocacy?
Well, to start off on the advocacy side of things, again, everything had to go virtual. You can't go door to door in Congress like we've been accustomed in the past. And so you have to schedule meetings in advance. You have to, probably do a lot more work to do advocacy in this pandemic. And I think a lot of people would agree we hate doing virtual or working from home, but it is what it is. The other thing that affected UMD is there's no need for a physical office. And so in August of last year, we had to close our office space in Washington, and hopefully in the near future, once the pandemic is over, we'll be able to have an office again. But again, you don't need an office, and why would you spend money on an office when everybody is working remotely? The other thing in terms of our programs, our masquerade, this is the first time in 16 years that we could not hold a masquerade. This is the first time in 16 years we have not been able to hold a leadership conference in Canada or in United States. First time we haven't been able to hold a gala. It's the first time that in 5 years that we haven't been able to have Birthright. And most likely we're not going to do Birthright again this year. And, some of you know that Birthright is a program where we send young Macedonians to Macedonia for a 3-week learning, life-changing experience where they work at an institution related to their studies Monday to Friday, and then sightsee around Macedonia on the weekends. And so unfortunately, probably 2 years in a row. And so we're really excited when 2022 comes so that we could, bring these programs back. But you can't hold cultural events. You can't, do dances. You can't do any of that during this time. And, it's really been difficult. And I'm sure for many members of our community, it's very difficult because we're very social people. We love to go to these dances. We love to do the oro. We love to mingle and try our food and our wine and our rakia. Unfortunately, that will probably not happen, at least for the next few months while this pandemic and vaccinations are going on.
Yeah, we've definitely, I would say in the last year, we've definitely had to think outside the box in more ways than one, whether it be a meeting, a gathering, like you said, we've done multiple Zoom calls, and I'm sure some people are a little sick of them, but we have to just think outside of the box of socializing with everyone.
Well, Deana, a few things that I should probably highlight is, the fact that before the pandemic, you would have maybe a book promotion of a Macedonian book here and there. You would have a Macedonian movie promotion, things like that. However, now with the pandemic, we've actually had more Zoom events on Macedonian history and identity. We've had more Zoom events on Macedonian language studies. We started this young program with the Macedonian Language e-learning center from North Carolina, which actually have continued, where they do online classes in the Macedonian language to promote our Macedonian language and make sure that young Macedonians, children are learning, our language, which is really important. And so, in a way, as I said, the pandemic harmed our work, but in a way, it's also enhanced and improved our work.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's what we all like to hear, I'm sure. But let's say, what are the plans for 2021 and beyond, outside of what you've mentioned?
Sure. And we'll touch on some of the advocacy efforts, I'm sure, through the questions later on. However, in terms of programs, we definitely want to have more historical linguistic identity programs where we bring speakers, wide range of speakers from academia, social, cultural, athletic, and whatnot communities, so that we can showcase their work and also inform people abroad of sort of the problems and the challenges that we have faced. We will continue doing our candle vigil in memory of the victims of the Macedonian genocide. And we're also going to be working a lot more on the human rights front. Last year, we had a wonderful report done by our Generation M Young Leaders Program to the United Nations, where they basically outlined the problems that Macedonian minorities in Bulgaria and Greece have faced. We've spoken with leaders at the United Nations and the State Department on this, and we will hopefully have more meetings related to this topic with policymakers, because now's the time. I mean, it's always been the time, but now even more because the pandemic and how much it's affected community, and also media relations and disinformation has grown and things like that. And so we definitely want to expand on this. Hopefully more, as I said, more language programs. We're thinking of ways of how to highlight different relationships, whether that's the Tempe, Arizona sister city partnership with Skopje, Macedonia, and we recently held an event with Arizona State University on the Macedonian language program there, which is the only Macedonian language program at any university in North America. And so those are different ways. I mean, hopefully we can do perhaps our IVA 5K, which we had to stop last year in the last couple of years, sort of, but hopefully this year, socially distancing, we can do some, IVA 5K run walk and at least help people in Macedonia like we've done. And some of you have probably heard the news where UMD has allocated $100,000 in giving medical equipment to hospitals in Macedonia to combat COVID. And hopefully we can do a lot more. But also, forming partnerships with startups and young professionals and young entrepreneurs in Macedonia. We have a program with Startup Macedonia and the Business Accelerator at the universities Fetikidal and Metodi, where we pair successful entrepreneurs and diaspora leaders from abroad with startups and young professionals in Macedonia, because at the end of the day, jobs, economic development are so critical to our homeland.
Right. Yeah. All right. So my last question on the pandemic and around that, 'cause I know we want to definitely switch gears, but in these pandemic times, how do we ensure the Macedonian identity thrives in the communities that we live in?
Well, I think that, I think you sort of, Alla alluded to this, is that, think globally, act locally. And so, we as a community need to do more to inform the public of what matters to us. I got an email this morning from somebody that's working on a book, and they had said that, and it's a book in memory of her mom, and I'm not going to give you too many details, but she had sent an email to somebody at a museum in Australia and shared her mom's story as a children refugee from the Greek Civil War. And the person did not know that this ever happened, was not aware. And so hopefully, by having this one person learn about this story, it will trigger where perhaps, the books and the stories will be shared at this museum. But I also think that we need to do more in humanitarian efforts, making sure that local communities are helping their local communities, our churches, our community centers, to give back. And I know that they are giving back and helping the needy, but I think that we need to double and triple our efforts even more, especially if we can. And then I also think that we need to get our public officials, and this is where the advocacy component comes in. Last year, and Deana very well, where the Michigan governor issued that wonderful proclamation, recognizing the role that small businesses and businesses that are owned by Macedonians in Michigan have made an impact on Michigan society. And I think that during this year, if we can get more local statements, more members of parliament in Australia and Canada, and more members of Congress and others, recognizing the existence of our community, what our community has done for the local and the community at large, but also recognizing our holidays like the Ilinden Uprising and our independence movement, as like President, or at the time, candidate for President Joe Biden did when he recognized Ilinden. It was the first time that any presidential candidate recognized Macedonian uprising, Ilinden Uprising, issued a proclamation, also Macedonian Independence Day, and many other holidays. I think, I know some of our folks in Australia are very, frustrated when government officials issue statements recognizing Greek Orthodox Easter. And sort of lumping everybody in the Orthodox community as Greek, which is unfair and untrue. And so I think we need to do a lot more to educate policymakers of why they need to, recognize other communities like the Macedonians and others who have made an impact. And so doing more cultural programming, I think, is important. And hopefully once, CDC measures and these sort of relaxing of the situation and more people are vaccinated, we can do more outdoor activities like picnics and all that, and get back to the social aspect that we as Macedonians and also human beings alone love to interact with other people.
I think we're patiently waiting for that. All right, so obviously 2021 had a rough start in DC, to say the least. You've lived in DC for nearly 17 years and have witnessed the transition of powers between now 4 administrations, right? So what should Macedonian-Americans expect of the new Biden administration? Like, can you give us an overview in layman's terms, especially for the people who do not follow the U.S.-Macedonia relations on a day-to-day basis like you do?
Well, I think this is a burning question for a lot of people in our community, not just in the United States, but globally, and people back home. First, I want to, say that I've never witnessed anything like what happened on January 6th with the storming of Congress. Being in Washington, and I'm only a 10-minute walk from the U.S. Capitol building, it was very concerning, I think, for everybody. And then just sort of how everything happened afterwards, and somewhat of a, peaceful transition into the next administration. I don't want to get into, what people think or how they reacted and whatnot. What I do want to get in is that with every administration, there's more opportunities for any community, for all of us as Macedonians. And the way I see it is that now is our time, and it's always our time. Every 4 years, you have this clean slate in the United States, or every 8 years, depending on the administration, but where you can educate policymakers and the administration on what matters to our community. And there's about 70 new freshman members of Congress, and this is a great potential for us to engage. Obviously, we can't do the door-to-door advocacy like we were, doing before, and probably we'll be able to do that in the future. But with the Biden administration, I think first of all, what's important is that, we tackle this big problem related to COVID and vaccinations. But I also believe that the United States, which is a leader in the world when it comes to, let's say vaccinations, with healthcare, in a lot of fronts, we need to do a better job, meaning the United States needs to do a better job in ensuring that smaller countries like Macedonia have equal access to vaccines. As you all know, Macedonia is facing a very difficult time now securing vaccines, very expensive. Unfortunately, COVID hit Macedonia a lot more economically than other parts of the world. You saw a decrease of 90% in tourism, and who knows where the GDP is now. There hasn't been the latest numbers, but they're estimating that a negative 5% in GDP growth, which is not good for anybody, right? And so that will make it more difficult for Macedonia to be able to purchase vaccines. And so we hope that the US administration, working with the European partners, will ensure that smaller countries like Macedonia have equal access instead of just for the rich and most powerful, wealthy nations. And I think that goes across the board. But in terms of other aspects with the administration, let's throw in the Bulgaria issue, for example. As you all know, Bulgaria has not apologized for what they did to Macedonia during the 2 or 3 years that they controlled Macedonia during World War II. Over 25,000 people were killed, and you saw 98% of the Macedonian Jewish population sent to Treblinka and to death camps. And so you have a Secretary of State now, Tony Blinken, who's the descendant of Holocaust survivors. And so we hope that the administration will call Bulgaria's bluff. And as you've probably heard, others that have called Bulgaria's bluff, like Madeleine Albright, during a hearing in December, she said this is a tragedy of what Bulgaria is doing, and they're actually taking the Greek playbook and using that against Macedonia. You also had the House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman, Gregory Meeks, pose this question on what the administration needs to do in terms of Bulgaria's blockage on Macedonia's EU membership. While EU membership doesn't affect Macedonians in America, Canada, and Australia, it does affect them in Macedonia. And yes, I want to underscore here the opposition that our organization and many Macedonians around the world have had against the Prespa agreement, the so-called friendship agreement between Bulgaria and Macedonia, is because all the time we Macedonians have to change our identity, change our name, change everything to appease our neighbors and appease, in order to join NATO and EU. Perhaps now that we are a NATO member, I hope that leadership in Macedonia, I'm hoping that they will take advantage of this, because now we're a ally with a capital A with the United States. We sit at the same table with the United States. And I think now we have a more open door approach with the incoming, or now the Biden administration. And what we at UMD want to work on a lot more is we really need to push for greater economic ties between the United States and Macedonia in terms of the Biden administration. Mm-hmm. Canada, Australia, and others are very different approaches, but there is no double taxation treaty between the United States and Macedonia. There are double taxation treaties between Canada and Australia and Macedonia. Why is this important? It will then help drive US businesses that are coming into Macedonia, US businesses that are owned by Macedonian-Americans. They won't be taxed in both countries. Also, pensioners, like, for example, my parents are hoping to retire half the year in Macedonia and half the year here. And I'm sure other people, so they will then be able to take their pensions within Macedonia without being taxed in both countries, driving and assisting the economy in Macedonia. A pension from the United States, Canada, and Australia is a lot better and goes a lot longer in Macedonia, and it helps the Macedonian local economy. But another area I think is, creating these jobs, economic opportunities, because when, I don't know how it happened, but we've sort of shifted You all recall probably during the Reagan administration, economic diplomacy was a very big thing, is like, Europe whole, free, and at peace. And it sort of started dwindling, where now our priorities are democratic reforms, rule of law, crime, corruption, and all that, which is very important. Macedonia has fallen, on the corruption index. We're 111th. It's the lowest that Macedonia has been in the last 20 years. So, we're 85th in terms of establishing, businesses, new businesses, and startups in Macedonia. So the numbers are growing in terms of where we're at. So yes, we do have to prioritize rule of law, crime, corruption. However, if you are not stable, if you have to provide food for your family and the people around you, and you can't afford to send your kids to college, then things become more complicated. And so we need to do a better job as diaspora people. And I'm very pleased that one of our advisory council members is, one of the participants, Peter Dallas. We worked together on launching a new program called Made in Macedonia, which is trying to kind of, expand the market for Macedonian products in the local communities where we're at. And this is where each and everyone can play a role. Each and every one of us can call our supermarkets and say, why don't you have Macedonian Ivar on your shelves? Or we can call our local liquor store and say, why don't you have rakia, mastika, and Macedonian wine on your shelves? And then hopefully they'll see a need to get this. And more people do this, the more we're successful, and then it helps the local economy in Macedonia. And so this is a long-winded answer to your question, but we definitely need to educate. And also, we pride ourselves on the 4 Ps with UMD. You have to be patriotic first, you have to be professional, you have to be persistent, but you also have to be patient, because things can't happen overnight. Even with the Biden administration, things are not going to happen overnight. One thing that we are noticing will be a top priority for this administration is the resolution of the Kosovo-Serbia dialogue. One concern of mine, which I noticed recently, and not just mine, all of UMD, I think we all share this, is that we cannot allow any more border changes or land swaps in the Balkans. And if border changes and land swaps are on the table for Kosovo-Serbia dialogue, we don't want that, right? We need to pressure our administration, we need to pressure the countries where we live in to not allow any more border changes and land swaps, because if there's a land swap between Serbia and Kosovo, that's going to have negative impacts on Macedonia, on Bosnia, on Montenegro, and other parts of the world. And so we have to keep pushing that. And so UMD will come out with a statement early this week on specifically this topic. And so stay tuned to.
Okay, great. We can't wait to obviously hear that release. That was a lot of information. Thank you. That was really good. I will say the Made in Macedonia products, I will show that I have my Kamilica. So I am drinking my Macedonian Kamilica from the store. And like you said, with, just asking for mastika, simple things like that. Our local liquor store here is more than willing to order that for us. And they have no problem, because it's bringing in business to them when they know if they have the product and we're the customers, they want to please us, right? So it's all about asking and us as a community trying. So thank you for that. So personally for myself and for many others, UMD has been our vehicle to speak up. Like you said, think globally, act locally, right? So what role can we play in advocating for Macedonian issues like where we live? What are some of the campaigns UMD is spearheading at the moment?
Well, like I said, I think, anywhere the Macedonian name, adjective, identity, and all that is featured is a positive thing for all of us. So obviously the Made in Macedonia, the Macedonian products is an important aspect of that. And plus, culture is our best ambassador. And so, getting Macedonian music to be played in more of our mainstream culture, our radios, if there's an ethnic radio in the area, or like an NPR where they feature ethnic communities, or look, with the pandemic, I think media outlets and others are looking for more and more stories. And so if there is a story, like the other day, I noticed there was an award, one of our members, Lou Nestorovsky, from Michigan, got an award for donating pizzas, to first responders and nurses and doctors at his local hospital. And he was recognized. His small business was recognized by the Chamber of Commerce. I think those are, as much as people don't think that helps advocacy, and actually it does, because it puts Macedonians more in the forefront, and they become leaders in our community, or more, taking more leadership roles. The other thing, we were talking with our Young Leaders program, Generation M, the other day. We were trying to see if there's a way to translate English into Macedonian on LinkedIn. And we discovered that there's no Macedonian language, translation on LinkedIn. There's no option for it. And so we're now going to be spearheading a campaign to get all Macedonians involved, to basically write to LinkedIn and encourage them to change their platform to allow for Macedonian language to be offered as a translation. So securing our Macedonian language, right? We teamed up with the Arizona State University, the Macedonian language program. Hopefully we'll be offering a scholarship for students that will study Macedonian language at Arizona State University. So ensuring that Macedonian language is taught and keeping that alive, I think, is another way of advocacy. The other thing is these, as I said, the proclamations, the recognitions from our councilmen, our mayors, our state officials, our governors, our members of Congress, recognizing the 50th anniversary of our church community, the 20th anniversary of our local Macedonian soccer club, the 10th anniversary of our local Macedonian dance ensemble. All of that helps, and it goes into the archives of the local, the state, the federal, history, right? And then when somebody is researching the Macedonian community, 25, 50, 100 years later, they're going to discover a lot of these things. The other is making sure, and this is something we're going to be pushing, is every 2 years, there's a new Congress, right? And as I mentioned, there's 70 new members of Congress that have never served in Congress, right? And so this is a prime opportunity for us to educate. Even, this week we have meetings with some members of Congress via Zoom, encouraging them to join the Congressional Caucus on Macedonia and Macedonian-Americans. And I'll tell you that some of these members of Congress won't join the caucus unless their Macedonian community asks them. And we're fortunate that we've had such good communities in Michigan, Ohio, New Jersey, and other places. There's so many communities in the US that have pushed for that. But the same goes for Canada, the same goes for Australia, and the same goes for Europe, right? And so the more people, policymakers, members of parliament, members of Congress become friends of Macedonia and friends of the Macedonian community, that expands, because those members of Congress will then be able to push a stronger relationship between the US and Macedonia. They will push the administration to pass a double taxation treaty, and they will push the administration to engage more on developing mechanisms to grow the economy, and sort of improve US-Macedonia trade, which I have to say has grown, it actually has tripled over the last couple of years, which is very positive. I think And a lot of that trade is happening as a result of Macedonians that are investing back home, and Macedonians that have helped companies set up operations, and also the products that are coming on our markets here. So I guess it's a circle. We always say Macedonians are responsible for one another. We all need to help each other. And I think it also goes back, to the human rights aspect. If we're not strong and influential in the communities that we reside in, we can't expect that somebody's going to help in other communities worldwide where they're facing discrimination. And so we need to strengthen our influence in the United States and Canada and Australia, use the mechanisms available to us to push for change within Bulgaria, within Greece, within Albania, where, luckily in Albania, we're recognized as a minority, but there's still challenges. Whereas in Bulgaria and Greece, they don't recognize the very existence of Macedonians. And we need to educate policymakers of why it's important, because human rights for us is human rights for the Macedonians in Bulgaria and Greece, and it's human rights for other ethnic minorities that are facing discrimination in those countries.
Wow, that makes total sense, and I can't wait to help in any way that I can personally. So Meto, right now there is no ambassador in DC, right? Nor is there a consulate in Detroit. And that's personally speaking, right, that I see. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, what are your feelings on that?
Well, first of all, I think I need to shed light that, once Macedonia changed the name, a lot of Macedonians abroad lost faith in the very institutions in Macedonia, because you know how it is. We fought so hard for an independent, sovereign Macedonia, and we were not consulted in the future of our homeland, because many people, still go to Macedonia, still invest in Macedonia, still have families in Macedonia. And all of us that are advocates for Macedonia play a part in that sort of global advocacy or global aspect of foreign affairs for Macedonia. The best bridge builders between US Macedonia, Canada Macedonia, Australia Macedonia are the Macedonians themselves. And so we're not incorporated in the decision making or feel a part of the decision making. It makes it very difficult for us to be voices for Macedonia. And so before this administration in Macedonia, we had really good, and I will say across all ambassadors, it doesn't matter on what administration, but let's be frank, there has not been much outreach from this current government with the diaspora. The fact that there are 50 ambassadorial consulate places in the world that are empty, particularly in countries where there's large Macedonian communities. America, there's no ambassador. There's no ambassador in Australia. There's no ambassador in Canada. There's no consul general in Michigan. There's no consul general in Melbourne. There's no consul general in Chicago, in Toronto. And those are our vehicles, but even basic necessities like, Macedonians that are citizens of Macedonia, renewing their passports, renewing their ID, obtaining citizenship. All diaspora people have the right to their citizenship as long as they can show that one parent descends from Macedonia. And if there are no people that are working on this, it doesn't help improve. And then people become jaded, people lose faith, and people don't want to get involved anymore. And so we're back at, ground zero, unfortunately. The fact that there's no ambassador for the last nearly 2.5 years in Washington, the most powerful city in the world, is really, really bad for Macedonia's foreign affairs. And you can't just do foreign affairs from Skopje. You need people on the ground here, and your embassies. I recall one of our diaspora members, Ljubica Achevska, raised in the United States, educated in the United States, decides to go back to Macedonia and say, we need an office in Washington. And the president at that time says to her, well, why don't you be the person running that office? And then she became the first liaison and then became the first ambassador to the United States. And since then, you can sense my frustration. We've gone down and down when it comes to our foreign, affairs. And so, yes, we can debate, we can argue, but I think, where it says, be the change that you want to see in the world, that Gandhi said, and ask what Kennedy said. And this year, marks the anniversary, I believe the 60th anniversary since John F. Kennedy said that famous speech, don't ask what the country can do for you, but what you can do. So I think we need to drive the change that we want to see. And so we'll see what happens, but just as frustrated like you are. You're in Detroit and there's no consulate. You don't know who to, communicate with. And I'll end it with that.
Yeah. As you said, it's frustrating, and we hit walls, just, for lack of a better word. So, yes. So I think we're ready to take on some questions. So I think I'll start with just if you can just maybe talk a little bit more in depth as far as what UMD's work has been on helping Macedonians in Macedonia with, COVID relief, or just COVID in general, other than, I know you mentioned the 100,000, but is there anything outside of that, or is there anything future that we're looking at as well?
Well, one of the areas, and that will continue and has been ongoing, is the support for Macedonian youth. We have given over $100,000 in scholarships to young Macedonians, not just diaspora people, but also students from Macedonia studying abroad. And I believe in the near future, we'll be giving out another 12 scholarships, and then there'll be another call for scholarships through our Canadian partner organization, Nova Generation. I think that's a critical, because you're investing in the future of our young leaders, and then those are going to become the future leaders in our communities. And hopefully one day we will see a member of Congress that is of Macedonian heritage as a result of those scholarships. I noticed one of our scholarship recipients, Dragan Georgiev, the other day, he was a scholarship recipient in 2012. He actually issued a quote for us in one of our images, where he said that, UMD investing in me and other young leaders is creating the future leaders of our community. Well, most recently, so fast forward now, 2021, he's now on the list of rising lawyers in the state of Illinois. And these people are going to be the future leaders of the local communities where they live in. And I can't underscore how important it is that we grow and expand those scholarship programs. And, I think a lot of people, if somebody can help and wants to, offer support in creating a scholarship in memory of their parents. Like the Bitov scholarship that we give out is in memory of John Bitov, and his family members decided, let's help UMD give out more scholarships. And we named our scholarship the Bitov Scholarship. But that doesn't stop from other families getting involved in memory of their parents, in memory of their grandparents, in memory of a brother or sister that left us, and they want to establish a scholarship which will help in others. You could also establish a scholarship for the legal community, establish a scholarship for the business community, the film community, others, right? So that people studying. I mean, right now, our scholarship is offered to all degrees, but you can establish a scholarship in anything, and UMD is that vehicle where UMD can assist in establishing that, but also, you know, charitable giving. I mean, you know, UMD has probably, you know, given out $250,000 in aid to help orphans in Macedonia, help senior citizens, supplying washing machines to senior citizens' homes, you know, clothes for orphans, children with Down syndrome and epilepsy, you know, so there's so many ways of getting involved. And I hope that we will continue doing this. And the cultural development, I mean, you know, we've given probably a little bit over $500,000 in cultural promotion. You know, we had this, we sponsored the first ever CD through the Smithsonian of Macedonian music. You know, you put Macedonia on the map of the Smithsonian Folkways recordings, which did not exist beforehand, and now it does, not just thanks to UMD. And I don't want to, you know, it's thanks to so many people that are involved in helping UMD and that are members and donors and supporters worldwide. We can't do it without you. We can't do it without the support of people like you, Deana, and many others that are participating. And so, you know, if there is an idea for somebody, you know, if somebody has an idea, wants to improve the work of UMD, submit your idea. Let's talk about if it can happen, and let's get your idea to fruition and help the broader Macedonian community.
Yeah, I think getting as many ideas in from our community, whether it's proceeded with or not, I think it's just a step in the right direction. So no answer or no question or answer will go unseen. We definitely want to hear from everyone. So I have a specific question from Michigan. So there's someone here that's participating. They've been lobbying for the Michigan 8th District, and as you know, Alyssa Slatkin, and they've been lobbying with her, you know, to join in on the caucus, and they're not really getting anywhere with her or from her office. What are your tips on how to accomplish this? And not specifically, I guess, with her office. My ask is basically, I want to go a step further, is anyone who's lobbying, whether it be, you know, the 8th District, you know, in Michigan or in other communities, what do you find been, you know, a good way or better results?
Well, you know, sometimes all it takes is one person reaching out to offices. I mean, I've had people that have come to me and said, we want to build relations with our members of Congress. They set up a meeting, and then, you know, their member of Congress joins the Macedonia caucus because they tell them, you know, what the community is doing, or their church community. You know, I think particularly with religious freedom being so important in the United States. I mean, United States was founded on the principles of religious freedom, fleeing, you know, Great Britain and coming to the United States away from religious persecution. And so our faith-based communities, our Macedonian Orthodox churches, and I think the religious leaders, the clergymen, can play a big role. I think sometimes having a clergyman send a letter, make a phone call to a member of Congress, invite them to a service at their church, you know, obviously when pandemic is over, but even now, if there's, you know, services where there's socially, you know, distance, I think members of Congress should be invited to participate in these services. I think, you know, for example, Cincinnati, you know, has, you know, we had a member of Congress join the Macedonia caucus, and Maria, which was our national advocacy director, with a couple of members, had a meeting with Congressman Steve Shabbat, and they informed them about the Macedonian Orthodox, you know, church in Cincinnati, informed him about the history of Cincinnati, Chile, which has existed for 90 years. It was founded by Macedonian immigrants from Aegean Macedonia. And nobody knew that Cincinnati, Chile was Macedonian, right? And you get that on your hot dogs at the stadium, at the baseball games, and all that stuff. And so we informed them, and then, he agreed to join the caucus. We've had other like, for example, your state senator, Gary Peters, we had a meeting once with 12 Macedonian leaders at his office when he was a House member, to get involved and to become a member of the caucus. So I think prepare, maybe a one-pager on what impact the community has made, the Macedonian community in your local community in the district. So for example, Slatkin, what are all the Macedonian business leaders in the community? What impact have their businesses made? How many jobs have Macedonians created in the local community? Where are the Macedonian churches? Where are the Macedonian community centers? Maybe a fact sheet like that. We're happy to help anybody, create some of these fact sheets. Some of the fact sheets should include details on, Macedonian identity, history, language, all that stuff. So some of the basic facts, Lake Ohrid is the third oldest lake and the oldest lake in Europe. Those are fun facts that members of Congress should know. And then hopefully, they will, join. Some newly elected members of Congress are adverse to joining ethnic caucuses in the first session. So that could be a challenge. Then they become a little bit more flexible in the second or third time they're elected. Also keep in mind that where a lot of Macedonians reside, there are other ethnic communities that are also working very hard against our interests and are constantly pushing against Macedonian communities. So we're up against a battle, particularly in places like Australia and Canada and parts of the United States. So I hope those are some tips and some examples that can help.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, maybe it's just thinking outside of the box. And like you said, for those that are trying to lobby, we so appreciated. Thanks for the ideas, Meto. We are at UMD, we will help in any way that we can, like you said, with a fact sheet, with ideas. Just reach out, let us know. I think I have one more question here in the chat. You mentioned that e-learning language that someone was doing. Can we send out that information, or do you have tips on where to access that?
Yeah, if Stephanie can put in the chat, Macedonianlanguage.org. And they also have a Facebook page, Macedonian Language E-Learning Center. I think they offer great tutorials. I also encourage you to look at Professor Christina Kramer's book. You could find on Amazon Smile, which is a book and a CD on Macedonian language. And then you also have Darko Biberko, which is a great done by Nev and Kalina Neškoska, which you could find on YouTube, Darko Biberko videos, which have great tutorials for learning the alphabet for children, ages 2 to 10, really.
Yeah, we love those here with Darko, and I think we'll definitely check out the Macedonian-language.org as well. So we do, for sake of time, I think we've got a few minutes here, so I just want to put a few reminders. Stephanie has been working hard to send over your questions, send over links. So she did send some links out for everyone to kind of take a look at. We recently have emailed out a survey. And this survey, the link was just posted by Stephanie. And this email is to help, or the survey is to help UMD gauge what our members would like to see in the future. Whether it be a certain event or certain advocacy or just anything. We just want your feedback. So the survey does close today. So if you do have a few moments to take it, we would love to hear from you. There is a portion at the bottom of the survey where you can type in some of your ideas or recommendations, things like that. So we look forward to going through those and addressing those in the near future. We also have another link posted in there. If you are ready to become a UMD member, click on that link and you can join UMD in our efforts to preserve and promote our rich Macedonian heritage. and ensure that our Macedonian voices are strong and are influential in our communities near and far. So if you would also like to join the UMD Events Committee and help me, we are always on for any takers who are looking to support the communities. We definitely have not just Zoom calls. Hopefully we'll have some more, like Meto said, our I Vote 5K, things of that sort. So I think if you want to help or volunteer your time for anything, please reach out to Meto or myself through our email addresses or through social media. We'd love to hear any feedback on today's Muabet with Meto or on anything else that you may have that you want to address.
Thank you, Deana, and just a couple of points. Just because they're coming up pretty soon, is I think one, March is International Women's Day or International Women's Month. May is Macedonian Flag Day, the anniversary of Macedonian Flag Day. June is Immigrant Heritage Month. I think that we need to use, even in this month, is Black Heritage Month, and I don't know if people knew that. Silently, Mike Illich, who is a Macedonian, was paying the rent for Rosa Parks, one of the fighters for rights in America for Black Americans. And so I think we need to highlight these stories to the members of Congress, for example, highlight these stories to our local communities. I think we need to feature what role women have played. I remember once I was scolded for saying fatherland. This was like maybe 15 years ago. I wrote a letter and I said fatherland, and a Macedonian woman lawyer out of Toronto contacted me and said, Meto, you must call it motherland, because it was the mothers that kept the Macedonian language and culture and identity alive while the fathers went on Pechelba abroad and worked. And so I think we need to highlight, the role women have played in our community and in business and in healthcare and in education and other areas. Our immigrant heritage, June, highlighting Macedonian immigrants in the countries where we live in and what impact they've made on society. And Flag Day, if anybody can arrange with their city to have a flag raising ceremony in honor of Macedonian Flag Day, I think that's very important, and it rallies and gets the community together. I'm not gonna suggest what flag. Look, I have my Macedonians, out, so you could pick whatever flag you want to use, as long as we're uniting, as long as we're sticking together, because united we can, stronger together.
Thank you, Meto. Before we conclude, sorry, I just have one more question that I think is a very important one that we should address. How can UMD help with the population registration that is about to happen in Macedonia soon?
Thank you very much for bringing this up. We're still looking at how the census is going to be done in Macedonia. As you know, and as the audience knows, Macedonia hasn't had a census in 20 years. And sometimes, numbers have been overblown or fabricated and whatnot. And obviously, we've seen this through the elections and, sometimes not having free and fair elections. So there's some concerns on how the census is going to be conducted, particularly during a pandemic. Don't look, and people should not look at the example of America, Canada, and Australia, because America has a census every 10 years, Canada and Australia have it every 5 years. However, these countries have very rigorous, mechanisms that they employ, and they plan out how the census is going to be. And they always have a plan B, a plan C. So for example, last year, we were part of the Macedonian-Americans in the US Census campaign, right? We were spearheading that campaign. We were launching it on March 12th, and then all of a sudden, that Monday, March 16th, they decided that everything is going to be virtual, right? So only filling out electronically, and whereas the census usually sends people in the field as, you know, census takers. And so they had to revamp the entire strategy so they have a plan B, right? So we have to first, UMD is still reviewing everything. We're talking to, we'll be talking to Statistics Macedonia and others, because we need to know exactly how all this is going to happen. One concern is the fact that they've allowed people from abroad to take the census. America, Canada, and Australia have a very different approach, where only if you're employed by the US government or serving in the military, that's the only way you would be counted if you're living abroad. The purpose of a census is to be a census of the population currently in the country, which then will help with decisions on healthcare, decisions on education, decisions on infrastructure. So if you have people that reported, 250 people living in the village, but there's only 10 people, and there's, they devote resources to that one village where there's 10 people, but they're not devoting it in another area that has 2,000 people, it becomes very difficult. So I think we have to evaluate all of this, and hopefully in the very near future, UMD will come out with a full-on, proposal on our website and in email communications on how one could get involved if they want to get involved in reporting, the census.
Okay. Well, we'll look forward to getting our hands on that and looking at it. But I think we're just at the top of the hour, so I want to thank you, Meto. I think I speak for everyone who's attended this call, that you've enlightened me in so many ways, and I've learned so much, and it was nice to chat. Hopefully we see each other soon, and not via Zoom, in person. But thank you for your time. For everyone that's joined, via Facebook Live or from the comfort of your home or wherever you're at, thank you so much for your time today. We truly appreciate it, and thank you for submitting all your questions and all your efforts within your Macedonian communities near and far. We really appreciate it, and we look forward for your attendance on our next Muabet Meto. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Deana.